Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Masterclass, criticizing new reviews by new reviewers. Oh my goodness. And this particular submission really seizes the bull by the horns. The review in question is of the Maria Callas Studio 1955 Rigoletto with Tito, Gobbi, Tullio, Serafin, and Giuseppe di Stefano. Well, I mean, if you want to jump into the maelstrom and deal with the opera crazies, you kind of have to be a little crazy yourself. This review, I think, kind of goes there in places. It's in 3 well-written paragraphs with some assumptions that I don't think it makes sense to make. And, well, we're going to take it one paragraph at a time. Let's put it that way. And we can see where it leads. Very, very interesting. And I thank this writer for their submission. I mean, I'm going to be critical, but it was awfully nice of you to make the effort. Here we go. You ready? Paragraph 1. Commentators and reviewers widely agree on Callas's mastery in the role of Amina, but despite the similarities between it and the role of Gilda, many have described initial encounters with this latter in Callas's discography as extremely notable because extremely surprising. Just as puzzling are comparisons of her Medea and Carmen, each of which can be rightly deemed a titanic object of amorous longing, but only the first of which places on just about every list of suitable La Divina assumptions, likely because of the exhilaration she can provoke to a listener while screaming in Italian about killing children. I have to confess, that's a good line. Yet the first language of Cherubini's iconic version of Euripides' legendary witch wife was French. Yes. And the choice made by unknowns for Callas to perform the role in Italian may constitute a tragic loss in operatic history. After all, on evidence of her phrasing in Bizet alone, there is nothing sexier than Callas's French. Period. That's the opening paragraph. All right, look. Some trenchant comments, some useful comments. When you say her mastery in the role of Amina, you should indicate what opera the role of Amina comes from, because not everybody can be assumed to know. But more than that, what does this have to do with Rigoletto? I mean, really, it's entirely irrelevant. Completely and utterly irrelevant, however interesting the observations are. And of course, one of the problems when you do something like this is that your interesting observations about the non-subject of the review may turn out to be far more interesting than your observations about the subject of the review, which is Rigoletto. So sorry, if I were editing, I would cross this whole thing out and tell you to start over. I really would. I mean, except for the opening line, where you can point out that perhaps her now I'm getting confused because Gilda, that's her name. Yes, I mean, Gilda and Amina and Despina and Frutella and Nutella. Let's not forget her. No, seriously. This is not about Rigoletto. Let's start and stick to the topic, shall we? And if you have interesting observations, such as some of these about screaming in Italian and whatnot, you can work them in. You can work them in as asides or along the way or with a phrase or two, but no, not a whole paragraph of non-topicality. So next, now we get to more of this. Scotto, Cortrubas, and Sills, all in fabulous command of Verdi and histrionics and coloratura, are the consensual choices for the tragic daughter of Verdi's Fool, with Sutherland receiving honorable mention by the canonizers at Gramophone and Classics FM for vocally inherent naivete. Well, that is not true. Many people admire Sutherland. I admire Sutherland, for example, and I have nothing to do with Gramophone and Classic FM or whatever that thing is. You have to be correct about those things. You can't just be snarky. That's number one. So let's continue. As per my own scrupulous tallying, well, you see, you just proved that you haven't been so scrupulous. So Now you're getting a little bit, maybe arrogant is the word? I don't know. The heaviest criticisms launched at Callas' Gilda concern a grand sum of one note. Two recordings, a live in difficult sound, a live one in difficult sound, not a live in difficult sound, and the present studio version. That's a thing. A studio is an adjective. It's not a noun in this case. Studio version in spectacular mono exists of Callas' interpretation of Rigoletto's tragically sexualized daughter. Okay, you've been going through that thing, tragic daughter and tragic sexualized daughter and tragic daughter, just Gilda. There doesn't have to be a what's the word, more flowery description of her every time she pops up. Okay, Rigoletto's tragically sexualized daughter, but everyone knows that only the studio version really counts, largely because of Tito Gobbi's practically definitive gesture. In this recording, at the very end of Act 2, Callas interpolates the customary, though unwritten, E6. Just call it a high E. Nobody knows what an E6 is. I know it's 6 octaves and the sixth E in technical musical terms, but that's not helping. It doesn't make any sense. But her E6 does not sound quite as like a high soprano note as like a scream. It is a Callasism that prompted me to excitedly hit replay multiple times, but that seems to provoke disgust in less tolerant opera lovers. Okay. Now we've gotten to paragraph 2. You have talked about Gilda. You have, in passing, mentioned the fact that the opera is really about Rigoletto. I mean, that's the opera. It's not about Callas. Now, I know it's the Callas Rigoletto, not the Gobbi Rigoletto. I understand that. But it's your job as a critic to set the record straight. And I think to make the point that calling it the Callas Rigoletto really does it a disservice. And if you have, why should you be writing about this in such a way that you identify yourself not as a music critic, but as a Callas groupie? I mean, you may want to be a Callas groupie, that's fine, but then don't call this a professional work of criticism. You have to talk about everybody else, and especially when everybody else is the subject of the opera. Gilda is not the main character. She's one of them for sure. I mean, I get it. And I understand the mystique about Maria Callas, but I think it's our job as critics to kind of, cut through the fog and the nonsense about these things. And yes, that high E is a scream. She did it anyway. She didn't care if it was a scream or a beautiful high note. That was a Callasism. You are correct. But it's not right to denigrate everybody else who has a real issue with what is, by any standard of good vocalism, a real issue. You can accept it. You can make all those points without having to go after the less tolerant opera lovers, because you're showing yourself here to be rather intolerant of everybody who is not Callas. So tolerance is an issue. And it sounds rather hypocritical for you to go after them while you're, and as we will see in the next paragraph, sort of bashing everybody else. You have not the tolerance of which you, credit yourself when it comes to Callas. It should be general tolerance, not just one person tolerance. All right, last paragraph. And Callasisms abound in this truly magnificent recording. Imaginative phrasing, occasionally in meaningfully audible inhalation, and many other effects. I think affects would be a better word there, actually, that are better heard than described in live in Gilda so vividly that all our consensual choices, if they sound more appropriate somehow in the role, nonetheless become a bit less interesting by direct comparison. Like I said, tolerance, my friend, tolerance. Moreover, no Rigoletto approaches Gobbi. Oh, finally, in the middle of the third paragraph, we actually get to Rigoletto. Good job. Approaches Gobbi as a baritone singing actor. Well, now he's gone again. Giuseppe di Stefano, though perhaps a little unsteady in the first scene, is one of the most ironically pleasing Dukes of Mantua on disc. Okay. Tullio Serafin gets the most possible from the La Scala forces, which contributes some electrifying brass and string sounds. I venture to say that for an all-round Rigoletto experience, any listener could be content with the present recording as their only selection. I myself have damaged my Sutherland recording and lost my Netrebko, and since acquiring this one have not cared at all to replace them. Okay. That's the end. This is really inadequate because Rigoletto is full of fabulous and well-known vocal numbers. La Donna Immobile, Caro Nome, Rigoletto's great monologues, when he comes back just before his house, I ever forget what it's called. It doesn't matter. The point is you have to talk about the three principal characters minimally, and they're great roles, the things that they sing that people who know Rigoletto expect and want to listen to for comparison. And yes, there's Gobbi, but you also have all the other Rigolettos and all those other recordings, and a whole plethora of tenors on those other recordings as well. And the only comparison you make with singers is between Callas and the ones who you are going to roundly dismiss because you theoretically are tolerant of Callas, but intolerant of all of them. So this is not satisfying. As an editor, I would send it back to you and say, look, you have to talk about the entire opera. You have to talk about the discography of the opera. You have to speak of the musical facts in this performance, aside from one high note from Callas. I mean, what makes the Callas Gilda so remarkable in most people's minds is the way that she is able to modify her voice to create the impression of youthful naivete. It's something else. It's something she does not in Amina. Forget Amina. One of her other great roles was Butterfly, where she famously was able to make a sort of girlish portrait out of her rather reluctant instrument. And that's a comparison you might have want to make. You might have want to make. A comparison you may have want to have made. There we are. Because it really does highlight what makes her Gilda something special. All that French crap at the beginning, that can go. So I admire the way that this is written in many respects. It's an erudite review in the sense that it's done with a background sense of real knowledge that kind of comes through, but you're not expressing it. You're not expressing it in a way that's useful for most readers who have to choose a recording of Rigoletto. You can't just pick this one because of one bad high E. It's got to be better than that. And some inhalations and Callasisms. For most of the opera, she's actually not singing. Let's not forget. At least until you get to the last act. Lots of other people have lots of other things to do. And that should be the subject of the review as much as Maria Callas herself, as I've said. So there you have it. That's my criticism. Like I said, I'm not trying to be deliberately harsh, but you want what you write not to be autobiography, which this threatens to become, I think, but rather to be useful in its discussion of the musical facts of the performance, and not a disquisition on people's taste regarding Maria Callas. I mean, she will always be a mythical object, but how you handle mythical objects is a very, very important aspect of your professionalism as a critic. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.